Saint Nocturne University. Book 3. Chapter 6. The council tried to take Nadine Baptiste at 5:42 p.m. By 5:43, Saint Nocturne had formed a custody defense committee. By 5:44, that committee had split into legal, magical, emotional, historical, snack, witness, and Talia with the bat subcommittees. By 5:45, Dre Coleman had written "No one calls it a subcommittee without my consent" on a whiteboard. By 5:46, Kiki Bell had added, "Soup Child Protection Squad." Dre stared at it. "Kiki. What? We are not calling it that." Ms. Renee walked by with a tray of sandwiches. "I am." Dre closed his eyes. "Fine." The chapel steps had become the center of the campus again, but this time nobody stood around waiting for a dean, a demon app, or a living building to tell them what to do. Solomon sat on the third step from the bottom, wrapped in a borrowed yellow hoodie that swallowed him at the wrists. His broken toy horse rested in his lap. He watched the campus with large, serious eyes, taking in everything like the world had grown too big while he was inside the walls, and he was determined not to blink through any of it. Nadine sat on one side of him, Zora on the other. Aya stood close behind them, arms folded, face calm in the way that meant she was ready to ruin someone's life with documentation. Maxine paced in a tight line at the foot of the steps, muttering to Mabel through the red candle, even though Mabel had stopped answering 5 minutes ago and was probably saving strength. Nasir leaned against a column near the chapel door, watching the lantern heart alert on his phone. Heart chamber stable, 97%. Every few minutes, it dropped to 96, then returned to 97, like the heart was breathing around the absence of the child it had held too long. That made nobody comfortable. Sol looked up at Zora. "Do they always come this fast?" "Who?" "People who want children." Zora's throat tightened. Nadine's hand closed into a fist on her knee. Aya looked away. Maxine stopped pacing. Zora forced herself to answer like he had asked a real question, because he had. People in power move fast when they think they can call it protection. Sol considered that. Are they fast because they care? Talia, standing 2 steps below with the bat over her shoulder, said, "Sometimes they're fast because they're scared someone else will care first." Sol looked at her. "You are wise for a night." Talia nodded solemnly. "Thank you." Zora muttered, "Do not encourage her." Sol looked between them and smiled. Small. Still strange on his face. But there. At the bottom of the chapel walk, the council cars appeared. 3 black vehicles. Silver seals. No sirens. They did not need sirens. They had entitlement. Councilwoman Inez Vale stepped out first in a dark green suit this time, flanked by 2 legal officers and 1 child welfare mage with a silver case in her hand. Behind them came a pair of ward officers who looked very carefully at the crowd and realized immediately that the crowd was looking back. Not just students. Staff. Parents. Local elders. Vale-born performers from Argosy. Wolves from Howell Ground. Market district vendors. Blood court students with contracts tucked under their arms. Root circle students with chalk on their fingers. Ghosts visible in upper windows. 1 janitor holding a mop like a spear. Ms. Renee saw the councilwoman looking. "Yes," she called. "He's with us too." The janitor lifted the mop once. Councilwoman Vale stopped at the base of the chapel path. "Saint Nocturne community," she said, voice controlled. The council is not here for conflict. Kiki whispered, then why dress like a lawsuit? Imani elbowed her. Vale continued, we are here to ensure the safety of a recently released bound minor whose condition is unprecedented and whose legal status requires immediate assessment. Zora stood. Sol's hand tightened around Nadine's sleeve. Zora noticed and stepped slightly in front of him. Councilwoman Vale's eyes moved to her. Miss Baptiste. Councilwoman. This is not a student disciplinary matter. Good, Zora said. Because I'm not asking permission. Murmurs moved through the crowd. Vale's expression sharpened. Serafina Dupont stepped forward from the legal table carrying a folder thick enough to bruise someone. With respect, Councilwoman, any custody review involving Solomon Baptiste is subject to emergency claimant protections, the collective oversight agreement signed this morning, the Hart Chamber Restoration Protocol approved at midnight, and Ashbourne Minor Welfare Law, which requires the least disruptive safe placement pending evaluation. The child welfare mage blinked. Serafina continued, also, the Council has an active conflict of interest due to historical involvement in child classification, bridge line containment, record suppression, and the current petition's reliance on systems under investigation. Malik stood beside her, holding another folder. And because Councilman Olin Mercer used the phrase ritual liability about living students, he added. Lila lifted a transcript. Verified. Dre lifted a second copy. Duplicated. Councilwoman Vale looked at all of them. You have been busy. Dre said, against my will. Ms. Renee said, and effectively. The crowd hummed with approval. Vale turned her attention back to Solomon. Her face softened. That somehow made Zora trust her less. Solomon, Vale said. My name is Inez. I would like to speak with you. Sol looked at Zora. Zora crouched beside him. You can say yes, no, later, or with people. Sol looked at Nadine. Nadine nodded through visible fear. Your choice, baby. He looked at Aya. Aya said, you can also ask why. Sol turned back to Vale. Why? The question landed beautifully. Vale paused. Then said, because we need to understand what happened to you. Sol looked confused. You can ask them. He pointed to the people around him. They were there when I came out. Vale's smile thinned. They were there at the end. The council needs full assessment. Nia Bellamy stepped forward. Her voice was calm. Assessment by whom? Vale looked at her. Qualified specialists. Nia nodded. Chosen by whom? The council maintains a list. No. The word was small and sharp. Vale stopped. Nia continued, the council does not get to choose the people who decide whether a child it failed to protect is safe with the people who found him. The child welfare mage shifted uncomfortably. Nia looked at her. You can assess if Solomon agrees, with his chosen witnesses present, and if your office discloses all conflicts. The mage opened her mouth. Then closed it. Then looked at Vale. That look mattered. It was the first crack. Vale saw it too. Celia St. Crown stepped forward next. Blood Court supports emergency protective standing for Solomon Baptiste under collective guardianship. Malik blinked at his mother. Celia did not look at him. She continued, any council attempt to remove him without due process will trigger an injunction from Blood Court Legal. Maxine turned. I don't need Blood Court claiming my kin. Celia looked at her. Good. We are not claiming. We are blocking. Maxine considered. Then nodded once. Fine. Mama Odessa lifted her cane. Vale stage offers witness sanctuary. Marva Cross planted her cane beside Odessa's. Howell Ground offers pack protection without claim. Ms. Renee lifted her chin. Staff Operations offers meals, schedules, and a list of adults who passed background checks before the school started pretending it cared. Dre whispered, Ms. Renee. She said, what? Children need lunch and safe adults. Professor Graves stood at the edge of the chapel doors, careful not to approach Soul without invitation. Root Circle offers restoration support under Solomon's consent and external oversight. 7, behind her, murmured, good phrasing. Delphine muttered, for once. Councilwoman Vale looked at the wall forming in front of her. Not physical. Worse. Procedural. Communal. Documented. She tried another route. Solomon's condition may pose danger to himself and others. His bond to the heart chamber is not fully understood. Soul looked down at his toy horse. His voice grew small. Am I dangerous? Every person around him reacted. Zora felt rage hit her ribs. Nadine reached for him, then stopped. May I? Soul nodded. She placed a hand gently on his back. You are not dangerous because people hurt you, she said. Aya's eyes filled. Nasir looked toward the ground. Nia looked at Vale like she wanted the sentence entered into law. Soul took that in. Then looked at Vale. I want to stay here. Vale's jaw tightened. Serafina immediately said, statement witnessed. Dre wrote it down. Lila said, not for publication. Dre nodded. Vale said, a child emerging from a supernatural binding cannot make fully informed placement decisions within hours of release. Nadine stood. She shook, but she stood. Then neither can the council make one for him within hours of losing access to this campus. That moved through the crowd like wind. Vale's eyes narrowed. Nadine continued, voice stronger. I am Nadine Baptiste. Solomon is my blood. So are Zora and Aya. I have lived with what happens when frightened institutions tell mothers that forms are protection. I will not sign another child away because someone official arrives with a silver case. The child welfare mage slowly lowered the case. Vale noticed. Everyone noticed. Zora looked at her mother. The anger was still there. But now it had to make room for something else. Pride, maybe. Annoying. At the edge of the crowd, Camille St. Crown's transport arrived. Nobody expected that. The black council custody vehicle rolled up behind Vale's cars. Its doors opened, and 2 officers stepped out first. Then Camille. Wrists bound in blue light. Face immaculate. Smile soft. The quad went silent. Malik moved first, stepping in front of Solomon's line of sight. Celia did the same. Aya's expression went flat. Nia took one step back. Brielle moved with her. Juno moved with both. Vale turned sharply. Why is she here? One officer looked unsettled. Transfer order was amended. Council requested her as witness regarding heart chamber custody risk. Vale's face changed. She had not requested that. Camille smiled. Oh, she said. Someone is improvising. From inside the sealed chapel, the bell rang once. Soft. Wrong. Professor Graves turned toward the doors. The lantern heart alert on every phone changed. Heart chamber stable, 91%. Then. External echo activity detected. Zora looked at Camille. Camille's smile widened. Lucien says hello. The quad erupted. Not in panic. In motion. Imani and Howelhouse formed a protective ring around Solomon before anyone gave an order. Maxine pulled Nadine and Sol back toward the chapel steps. Talia lifted her bat. Malik and Celia blocked Camille's path. Serafina snapped open a legal charm that projected custody orders into the air. Brielle grabbed Nia's hand and asked, "Move." Nia said, "Move." They moved. Professor Graves struck her cane against the chapel stone. The doors slammed shut. Too late. The bell rang again from inside. The lantern heart dropped to 87%. Camille laughed, delighted. Did you think stabilizing the heart meant Lucien stopped learning? Vale turned on her. What did you do? Camille looked at the councilwoman like she was mildly disappointed. I sat in custody while your people filed forms. That was enough. Dre looked at Lila. Paperwork gap. Lila looked furious. They used the custody transfer network. Celia's face went cold. Nightingale piggybacked through council movement. The bell rang a third time. The chapel doors trembled. Sol cried out. Not loudly. But every adult around him heard. Zora turned. Gold light flickered under his skin. The same gold that had threaded his restored hand. Aya grabbed the railing. The heart is pulling on him. Nasir's eyes flashed. Because he's the missing anchor. Professor Graves shouted, "Get him away from the chapel." The chapel doors opened by 1 inch. Red light spilled out. Sol clutched Nadine. I don't want to go back. Zora stepped between him and the doors. You're not. Camille's voice floated over the chaos. Bold, but inaccurate. Talia lunged toward her, bat raised. Imani caught her by the back of the hoodie. Not yet. Talia snarled, she is monologuing near a child. And you'll get one swing if we survive. Promise. Promise. The red light reached across the steps like fingers. Maxine threw black salt. It burned. The light recoiled, then stretched again. Mabel's voice burst from the red candle. Move the boy. Nadine tried to lift Sol, but the gold light around him intensified, pinning him to the step. He looked at Zora, terrified. I'm stuck. Zora grabbed his hand. The pull hit her immediately. The chapel wanted Sol. But it recognized Zora. The old liaison hook, the root anchor, the secret keeper, the almost soft door. Red light wrapped around her wrist. Aya shouted, Zora. Zora gritted her teeth. No. Nasir grabbed Zora's other arm. The pull hit him too. His eyes went black-red gold. Aya grabbed Nasir. The bridge lines connected. The chapel bell began ringing over and over. The crowd backed up. Professor Graves drew a containment circle so fast sparks flew from her cane. Do not let the line close. Seven and Delphine dropped beside her, chalk and pearl pins moving in sharp synchronization. Micah threw charm bracelets into the crowd. Put these on if you like having bones. Kiki caught one. Why would you phrase it like that? Marketing under pressure. The red light yanked harder. Zora felt the heart chamber below the chapel open like a mouth. Not physically. Relationally. It had learned from them. It no longer tried to force one liaison. It tried to reassemble a bridge from pieces, Solomon the old anchor, Zora the root interface, Nasir the blood bridge, Aya the renamed operative. A family turned into architecture. Again. Nadine screamed, "No." She grabbed Aya around the waist, trying to pull her back. Maxine grabbed Nadine. Mabel's candle burned blue. The line held. Barely. Camille watched, eyes shining. "See," she called. "Systems adapt." Vale stared at the red light, horror finally outweighing politics. "This is council custody contamination," Lila said, voice shaking with fury as she recorded with consent from the public emergency protocol. "Say it. Say your transfer order opened a channel." Vale did not answer. Dre looked at her. "Say it before the record says it without you." Vale swallowed. Then, loudly, council custody transfer created an external echo channel. Serafina immediately shouted, "Witnessed." Celia added, "Entered." Dre wrote it down. The heart chamber dropped to 72%. Soul sobbed. Zora's knees hit the stone. She was tired. So tired. Tired of being chosen by broken things. Tired of family meaning someone tried to use your blood before asking your name. Tired of every no requiring an essay, a witness, a spell, a committee, a fight. The red light tightened around her wrist. For 1 second, it whispered in a voice that sounded like relief. "You can hold it?" She almost believed it. Then Talia's voice cut through. "Zora Baptiste, if you let a haunted school promote you, I will never forgive you." Zora laughed. It hurt. It saved her. She looked at Solomon. He was crying, but his hand still gripped the toy horse. She looked at Aya. Her sister's face was pale with pain, but her eyes were locked on Zora's. She looked at Nasir. He shook his head once. "No more infrastructure." Zora looked at the red light. "No." The heart pulled. She pulled back. "Not alone." "Soul," she said through clenched teeth. "Say your name." He sobbed. "I did." "Say it again." "I'm scared." "Scared counts." Soul squeezed Nadine's hand. "My name is Solomon Baptiste." The red light flickered. Aya lifted her voice. "My name is Aya Baptiste." The light around her cracked. Nasir spoke next. "My name is Nasir Voss." The red around him shuddered. Zora lifted her chin. "My name is Zora Baptiste." Mabel's voice rang from the candle. "And mine is Mabel Baptiste, since y'all keep forgetting old women count." Maxine shouted, "Maxine Baptiste." Nadine shouted through tears, "Nadine Baptiste." Then, from the crowd, Talia yelled, "Talia Price, not Baptiste, still involved." Kiki shouted, "Kiki Bell, also nosy." Rome shouted, voice shaking but brave, "Rome Ellis." Imani, Imani Cross. Taj, Taj Cross. Brielle, Brielle Laron. Nia, Nia Bellamy. Juno, Juno Price. Dre, Andre Coleman. Lila, Lila Freeman. Seven, Seven Monroe. Delphine, Delphine Hart. Malik, Malik Saint Crown. Serafina, Serafina DuPont. Celia, Celia Saint Crown. Ms. Renee, Renee Jackson, and I better be on payroll for this. Mama Odessa, Odessa Blue. Marva, Marva Cross. Professor Graves, Sana Graves. Names rose. Not as roll call. Not as ownership. as refusal. Students shouted their own names. Staff shouted theirs. Elders. Parents. Ghosts. Workers. People who had hidden names. People who had changed names. People who had lost names. People who were not ready to say old names but could say chosen ones. The red light could not find a single bridge. It found a crowd of doors, each with its own lock. It faltered. Camille's smile vanished. No, she whispered. Zora saw it. Saw the fear. Not fear of losing control. Fear of a system becoming unable to choose one throat to choke. The red light snapped off Solomon first. Then Aya. Then Nasir. Then Zora. They collapsed onto the steps. Nadine caught Sol. Maxine caught Zora. Aya and Nasir fell against each other. The chapel doors flew open. Inside, the lantern heart blazed red. Dean Nightingale's voice roared from below. You cannot govern hunger with names. Sol lifted his head from Nadine's shoulder. He was still crying. Still afraid. Still a child. But he looked at the chapel and said, You don't get mine. The lantern heart cracked. This time, not open. Inward. A sound like glass folding into itself rolled beneath the campus. Professor Graves shouted, Down. Everyone dropped. The chapel windows flashed gold. The red light imploded. Not exploded. Collapsed. Sucked back into the heart chamber like the school had inhaled its own scream and choked on it. The chapel doors slammed shut. The bell broke. One final sound, sharp and bright. Then silence. Every phone lit. Heart chamber status. Lantern heart restructured. Nightingale echo, sealed. External echo channel, closed. Protected person access, denied to heart system. Stability, 100%. Under it, one new line appeared. No child may serve as anchor. Nobody cheered. Not at first. Sol was still crying. Nadine held him. Aya knelt beside them, one hand on Sol's back, the other gripping Zora's sleeve. Nasir sat on the step, breathing hard. Zora looked down and realized she was still holding Solomon's toy horse. It must have fallen. She handed it back. Sol took it with both hands. Did I do okay? He whispered. Zora's face crumpled. No. Sol's eyes widened. She pulled him gently into a hug, careful, asking with her arms before closing them. He leaned in. You did amazing, she said. That's different. He cried harder. So did Nadine. So did Maxine. Aya covered her face. Talia turned around and wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her hoodie. Kiki saw and whispered, Night behavior. Talia pointed the bat at her without looking. Tell anyone and I'll deny it. Camille tried to run during the crying. Of course she did. The blue restraints around her wrists sparked. She twisted toward the council cars, using the confusion, her face no longer amused but cold with survival. She made it 4 steps. Nia saw first. Camille. Her voice cut across the quad. Camille froze. Not because of magic. Because everyone heard. Brielle stepped beside Nia. Juno beside Brielle. Malik and Celia turned. Imani and Taj moved toward the cars. Serafina snapped open a binding injunction. Lila raised the recorder. Dre lifted the transfer order. Talia smiled. Finally. Camille looked around. No corridor. No private room. No family cover. No donor elevator. No dean to root her through a mirror. Just witness. Nia walked toward her. Brielle started to follow, then stopped. Nia glanced back. "Come with me," she said. Brielle did. Juno too. They stopped in front of Camille. Nia looked at the woman who had stood in the yellow room, who had called her distressed, who had tried to turn memory into liability. "You don't get to leave through chaos," Nia said. Camille's mouth curled. "And you think you stop me?" "No," Nia said. "We do." Juno lifted their chin. "Face witness." Brielle said, "Voice witness." Lila said, "Record witness." Dre said, "Process witness." Malik said, "Blood court witness." Serafina said, "Contract witness." Imani said, "Physical witness." Talia lifted the bat. "Personal preference witness." Camille looked at all of them. For the first time, she had no elegant answer. The child welfare mage from the council stepped forward, shaking slightly. "I am changing my recommendation," she said. "Council custody is not appropriate. Solomon Baptiste remains under collective protective placement pending independent review." Vale turned sharply. The mage swallowed, then continued. "And Camille St. Crown's transfer order is suspended pending investigation into echo channel contamination." Celia smiled faintly. "Very good." Camille stared at the mage. "You will regret that." The mage's voice shook. "Probably." Nia said, "Good answer." The officers took Camille again. This time, not into a council car. Into a Saint Nocturne holding ward under public witness, with blood court, student, staff, and city observers assigned. No mirrors. No private transfer. No old routes. As they led her away, Camille looked back once. Not at Malik. Not at Celia. Not at Brielle. At Solomon. Her face was unreadable. Then she was gone. The council cars left without Solomon. That was the first official miracle of the afternoon. The second was that Ms. Renee got everyone to eat. By 7 p.m., the dining hall had transformed into something that was not quite celebration and not quite emergency feeding. Long tables filled the room. Staff brought out trays of food that did not have themed trauma names because Ms. Renee said they were retiring that foolishness until next apocalypse. Market district vendors sent pans of rice, greens, stew, roasted vegetables, plantains, cornbread, and cakes. Hull House carried tables. Blood court students distributed cups without making it weird. Root Circle enchanted warming trays. Vale-born students hung soft lights and privacy curtains for anyone who needed to cry away from the crowd. Sol sat between Nadine and Zora, eating macaroni and cheese like it was a sacred text. He looked at Ms. Renee. "This is better than neutral soup." Ms. Renee pressed a hand to her chest. "I know, baby." Zora looked at him. "Don't let her ego get worse." Ms. Renee pointed a spoon at her. "I fed your whole bloodline through a supernatural custody crisis." Zora raised both hands. "Fair." Aya sat across from Sol, watching him with a tenderness she did not seem to know where to put. He looked at her. "Were you lonely?" Aya froze. The table went quiet. Sol waited with the direct cruelty of children who had not yet learned how to soften true questions. Aya nodded. "Yes. Me too." Aya's eyes filled. Sol pushed his roll across the table. She stared at it. Zora whispered, That is apparently Baptiste diplomacy. Aya took the role. Thank you. Sol nodded. Nadine watched them both, one hand at her mouth, trying not to collapse under all the years arriving late. Maxine leaned toward her. Breathe. Nadine laughed weakly. I hate when you're right. Maxine's face softened. I missed you. Nadine looked at her sister. Anger and love crossed her face together. I missed you too. And I am furious with you. I know. Good. They sat with that. It did not destroy them. At another table, Imani held the East Ward meeting request in one hand and a fork in the other. Kiki was talking with her mouth full. I still think you should bring snacks to Howl Ground. People argue less when chewing. Marva nodded. She is correct. Imani stared at her grandmother. You agree with Kiki? Frequently. Quietly. Kiki gasped. Ms. Marva. Marva pointed her fork. Do not become unbearable. Too late, Rome whispered. Kiki turned. Baby, you are getting bold. Rome smiled into his plate. Taj sat beside him, quiet. Rome looked at him. You can come tomorrow, Rome said. Taj froze. To the meeting. Yeah. Taj swallowed. Are you sure? No. Taj nodded. Rome continued, but I want you there when they say my name. Not to speak. To hear it. Taj's eyes shone. I can do that. Kiki sniffed. I hate growth. It makes me emotional and ugly. Imani muttered, you were already emotional. Not ugly though. Debatable. Kiki gasped. Marvel laughed. At the blood court table, Malik stared at a plate he had barely touched. Serafina sat beside him, reviewing custody documents because apparently she found peace through legal aggression. Celia sat across from them, sipping tea. Malik looked at his mother. You stood in front of Solomon. Celia did not look up. Yes. You also threatened council injunction. Yes. And said blood court wouldn't claim him. Yes. He paused. Are you changing? Celia set down her tea. Do not make me sound soft. Never. She looked toward Solomon, then back at Malik. I have spent years confusing control with protection. Today I watched a child ask if he was dangerous because adults kept arriving with forms. Her voice did not break. That almost made it worse. I am not changing into someone else. I am becoming unable to tolerate the old excuses. Malik nodded slowly. Serafina, without looking up, said, that is unfortunately moving. Celia's mouth twitched. Malik looked at Serafina. You think everything is unfortunate when emotional? Because it usually creates paperwork. Do you want help? She slid a folder toward him. He smiled. I meant emotional help. She stared. He took the folder. Paperwork it is. At the Valeborn table, Brielle sat with Nia, Juno, Andre, and Mama Odessa. Andre was telling Sol's story to himself in potential song structure under his breath until Mama Odessa smacked the table with her cane. No. Andre blinked. I didn't say anything. You arranged a bridge. I was thinking. Think quieter. That child is not a hook. Brielle pointed at Odessa. That. Put that in policy. Juno already had the policy draft open. Nia leaned toward Brielle. You okay? Brielle looked startled. Then considered actually answering. I wanted to post today, she said. Nia nodded. About the council. About Sol. About Camille getting stopped. About all of it. Why didn't you? Brielle looked across the dining hall at Solomon eating beside his family. Because every caption sounded like taking. Nia's face softened. That's a good reason not to. Brielle nodded. After a moment, Nia said, you can write something later. With consent. Maybe not as a post. Maybe as testimony. Or policy. Or music. Brielle looked at her. You said music. I did not say performance. Still. Nia rolled her eyes. Brielle smiled, small and careful. I'll ask first. Nia nodded. I know. At the root circle table, Seven sat with Delphine, Micah, and Professor Graves, though the seating arrangement looked like an academic tribunal disguised as dinner. Miles Holloway's thesis sat on the table between them. Micah put a napkin under it. Respectfully, he said, books should not touch dining hall residue. Delphine nodded. Correct. Seven looked at Professor Graves. You're still going to say it at the hearing? Graves nodded. Yes. And in the publication note? Yes. And in the scholarship charter? Yes, Seven. And. Delphine interrupted. Monroe, if she lies, I will ruin her citations personally. Professor Graves looked at her. Delphine looked back. Respectfully. Graves almost smiled. Understood. Seven looked at Delphine. She narrowed her eyes. What? Nothing. Do not make that face. What face? The face where you realize you trust me and become insufferable. Michael leaned forward. Romantic. Delphine threw a roll at him. He caught it. Thank you. The night softened after dinner. Not completely. Saint Nocturne did not do completely. But people began leaving the dining hall in groups that would have seemed impossible a week earlier. Blood court students walking with housing audit organizers. Root circle legacies carrying boxes beside scholarship students. Howl House first years trailing Marva and Imani like ducklings with attitude. Vale-born students laughing too loudly, then stopping when laughter hit a bruise, then starting again. Staff leaving with leftovers. Parents talking to students instead of about them. Ghosts drifting through walls with new forms pinned to their translucent chests. At 9:30, Zora, Aya, Nadine, Maxine, Solomon, Nasir, and Talia gathered in a small lounge in Magnolia Hall. Talia had insisted because, in her words, public family trauma is how schools become documentaries. She stood near the door with the bat. Sol sat on the couch under a blanket, leaning against Nadine. He had refused to sleep until he saw where Zora lives, then immediately declared Magnolia Hall loud in the walls. Talia nodded. Correct. Zora sat on the floor because the couch felt too intimate. Aya sat beside her. Not touching. Close. The childhood record waited on both their phones. Nadine's maternal memory seal waited on hers. They had all chosen schedule with witness for another day. Not tonight. Tonight, they sat with what they knew. Nadine told Aya about the yellow baby blanket she had made before everything broke. Aya told Nadine about carving her real name under drawers. Maxine told Sol about Mabel's candle shop before it was Maxine's. Sol told them the heart chamber used to hum songs through stone when storms came. Zora said very little. Then Nadine looked at her. Tell me one thing I missed, her mother said. Zora's throat tightened. Aya looked at her. Not asking. Just there. Zora looked down at her hands. I used to steal your red lipstick and put it back wrong. Nadine blinked. Then laughed through tears. I knew. Zora looked up. You knew. Baby, you left it uncapped every time. Talia whispered, sloppy crime. Zora pointed at her. Security, please. Sol giggled. Aya smiled. Nadine wiped her face. I missed lipstick crimes, Aya said softly. Zora looked at her sister. The grief in that sentence was too big for the lounge. Zora held out one hand. Aya stared at it. Then took it. They stayed that way for a few seconds. Long enough. At 11 o'clock, Solomon fell asleep against Nadine's side, toy horse tucked under one arm. No one moved for 20 minutes. Not because they could not. Because they could. At midnight, the campus speakers crackled. Everyone froze. The cheerful orientation voice came through softly. Good evening, Saint Nocturne community. Today's emergency count is lower than yesterday's. Progress acknowledged. Across campus, students laughed tiredly from dorm windows, lounges, tents, and hallways. The voice continued. Tomorrow's schedule includes continued class cancellation, protected record appointments, council custody injunction review, Howell ground listening circle, faculty accountability hearings, housing audit disclosures, blood contract review, veil-born consent drafting, staff compensation negotiations, and optional rest. A pause. Rest is strongly encouraged and historically underutilized. Zora closed her eyes. Talia muttered, it ate us up. The voice continued. Final notice, no child may serve as anchor. No student may be appointed singular bridge. No record may be opened without process. No group chat may be used for emergency governance without a moderator. A longer pause. Especially group chats. Somewhere down the hall, Kiki yelled, we heard you. The speakers clicked off. For once, nothing else happened. No app appeared. No bell rang. No mirror whispered. No hidden door opened. Saint Nocturne sat in rare, suspicious quiet. The next morning, sunlight came through Magnolia Hall's windows clean and ordinary. Solomon woke up and asked for pancakes. Not trauma pancakes. Just pancakes. Ms. Renee made them herself. By noon, the council's protective custody petition had been blocked pending independent review. By 2, Solomon's temporary protection structure was approved, Nadine as primary family claimant, Maxine and Aya as family witnesses, Zora as chosen sibling witness only when she agreed, Ms. Renee as care logistics witness, Mama Odessa and Marva as community protection witnesses, Nia as consent advocate, and a child restoration specialist from outside Ashbourne selected by Solomon after he rejected the first 2 because their shoes sounded mean. The shoes were, apparently, a valid concern. By evening, classes remained cancelled. By the next week, they were still cancelled. No one complained too loudly. The university could not reopen as if nothing had happened because too many people now knew where the doors had been hidden. Housing audit began public proceedings. Blood contract review voided its first 20 contracts. Veil-born consent policy passed its first draft with teeth. The Howell ground listening circle lasted 6 hours and ended with Taj assigned restitution work in 3 wards and Rome deciding he wanted to study PAC law so nobody can word trap me again. Faculty accountability suspended 3 professors, placed 5 under review, and approved Miles Holloway's thesis for publication with full authorship restoration. Dre got back pay for student workers. Then immediately got nominated for another committee and threatened to transfer. He did not transfer. Lila published the first major article only after every named student approved their part. The headline was, "They use calm like a weapon, how Saint Nocturne students, staff, and community exposed the school that fed on secrets." Dre refused to admit he liked it. Brielle did not rebuild the shade room below. Instead, she started a consent-based campus media project called Say It With Your Chest or Don't Say It At All, which Nia called Too Long and Mama Odessa called Ugly But Honest. Juno became its first policy editor. Andre tried to submit a theme song. He was told to fill out a form. He cried theatrically. Malik and Serafina did not become simple. Nobody at Saint Nocturne did. They fought over legal strategy, family guilt, public responsibility, and whether Malik saying we was presumptuous. It usually was. They still sat beside each other. Imani did not become Queen of Howl House. She became something more annoying to old power, a leader who kept refusing titles until the responsibilities were clearly written. Kiki became her unofficial communications director by accident and then on purpose. Talia became famous as the Night with the Bat, hated it, Monetized it, and donated half the money to housing audit because she claimed generosity was less embarrassing when it came from branding. Zora and Aya delayed their childhood record 3 more times. Then scheduled it. Then cancelled. Then scheduled again. Nobody rushed them. That was the point. On the day they finally opened the first piece, they did it in Maxine's shop after hours, with Nadine, Solomon, Nasir, Mabel's candle, Talia in the corner, and enough food for a family bigger than anyone knew how to name yet. The first memory was small. Not the chapel. Not blood. Not screaming. A kitchen. Nadine younger, laughing while toddler Aya banged a spoon against a pot and baby Zora slept in a yellow blanket on the table beside a bowl of peeled oranges. Aya cried. Zora cried. Nadine cried. Solomon ate 3 orange slices and said the baby looked kind of rude. Zora laughed so hard she had to sit down. That memory did not fix the others waiting. But it gave them a place to start that was not the wound. Months later, Saint Nocturne reopened for classes under emergency reconstruction status. The first day back, Founders Auditorium filled for orientation. Not the old orientation. No glossy speeches. No dean on stage. No calming field. No banners pretending faction unity had ever been peaceful. Students, staff, faculty, and community witnesses sat together. The cheerful orientation voice introduced itself as the Administrative Harm Reduction Interface, which everyone immediately shortened to ARI, and Ari sounded offended for 3 full seconds before accepting it. At the podium stood no single leader. There was a round table on stage. Enough chairs. Dre had checked. The first speaker was Ms. Renee. She looked out at the incoming students and said, "Welcome to Saint Nocturne. This place has history, debt, ghosts, bad plumbing, good food, and a habit of turning secrets into architecture. We are working on it. You will not be asked to become an anchor, bridge, vessel, liability, mascot, symbol, or lesson without consent. If someone does ask, come see me." The room applauded. Then Zora spoke. Not because she wanted to. Because she had chosen to. "This school loves making people feel special when it means useful," she said. "Be careful with that. Be careful with secrets. Be careful with public shame dressed up like truth. Be careful with repair dressed up like status. And if something here asks you to hold everyone else together alone, say no loud enough that people hear who tried to ask. Aya spoke after her. My name is Aya Baptiste, she said. Some of you will know another name from records. Do not use it. That was all. It was enough. Nasir spoke next. You are not infrastructure. Then sat down. Kiki whispered from the front row, concise king. Imani elbowed her. Brielle stepped to the microphone with Nia and Juno beside her. My voice is mine, Brielle said. Your voice is yours. Your silence is yours too. Around here, people will tell you drama is culture. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it is a feeding pattern. Learn the difference. Nia added, and ask before you tell someone's story. Juno said, especially if you can make it entertaining. Lila spoke about journalism. Dre spoke about records. Actually, Dre tried not to speak about records, but Ms. Renee stared at him until he did. Seven and Delphine spoke about academic integrity and institutional theft, then argued over the phrase transformative accountability in front of everyone. Micah shouted, romantic, from the balcony. Delphine did not throw anything because it was orientation. Growth. Malik and Serafina spoke about contracts. Celia stood in the back, watching with an expression that was not quite pride because pride was too simple. Marva spoke about names. Mama Odessa spoke about stages. Maxine spoke about roots. Nadine sat beside Solomon in the front row. Sol had been given noise-dampening headphones, a notebook, and strict permission to leave whenever he wanted. He stayed until the end, drawing crooked horses in the margins of the orientation program. When the final speaker finished, Ari came over the speakers. Welcome, new and returning students. Please collect your consent packets, housing disclosures, mirror safety guides, supernatural ethics addenda, dining hall schedule, and emotional support snack voucher upon exit. A pause. Classes begin Monday. The entire auditorium booed. Ari continued, feedback acknowledged and ignored. That got laughter. Real laughter. Not the kind used to cover fear. Outside, the campus looked different. Not rebuilt. Rebuilding. The chapel remained closed except for scheduled heart chamber oversight. Its bell had been removed and placed in the archive with a label written by Talia. Do not ring unless you want problems. The banners still hung. Blood Court. Howl House. Root Circle. Valeborn. But below them hung a new one, made by students, staff, and community artists from pieces of old fabric, protest signs, broken contract paper, stage ribbons, pack cloth, root thread, and dining hall aprons. It read, no single bridge. At sunset, Zora found Solomon sitting on the chapel steps with his toy horse beside him. Hey, she said. He looked up. Am I allowed to sit here? Yeah. Just not alone too long. I'm not alone. The horse is here. That horse has no emergency training. He listens better than most adults. Fair. She sat beside him. Across the quad, Aya and Nadine walked slowly together. Maxine followed at a distance, pretending not to supervise. Nasir sat under a tree reading one of his mother's restored letters. Talia argued with a housing officer. Kiki filmed Imani yelling at a committee schedule. Brielle and Nia walked near the Valeborn studio, not holding hands, but close enough for rumors to start and be politely ignored. Juno watched them with a smile and then went back to editing policy. Malik and Serafina stood outside the alumni lounge, both looking annoyed and fond, which was probably their version of peace. Seven and Delphine argued outside Graves Hall while Micah watched from behind a bush for research purposes. Sol leaned against Zora's side. "Is this home?" Zora looked at Saint Nocturne. The cracked windows. The patched paths. The haunted dorms. The committees. The people who had lied. The people who had told the truth late. The people who were trying. The institution that could still become dangerous if they got lazy, hungry, nostalgic, or too proud of surviving it. "No," she said. Sol looked up. Zora smiled a little. "Not by itself." He thought about that. Then nodded. "We make it? Over and over. That sounds tiring." "It is. Can we have pancakes while making it?" Zora looked at him. "Obviously." The chapel door behind them stayed closed. No red light. No whisper. No bell. Just wood, stone, and the memory of a place that had learned, finally, that not every door got to open from the inside. As night settled over Saint Nocturne, phones buzzed across campus. Everyone froze for half a second out of old habit. But it was only Ari. Reminder: emotional support snack vouchers expire Friday. A second message followed. Rumor-based apps remain prohibited unless governed by consent policy. Then a third. Someone has attempted to register the Soup Child Chronicles as a student publication. Request denied. Kiki screamed from across the quad. "Who snitched?" Ms. Renee called back, "Me." Sol laughed so hard he nearly dropped the toy horse. Zora laughed too. Then Aya looked over from across the quad and smiled. Zora lifted one hand. Aya lifted hers back. Not perfect. Not healed. Not finished. But chosen. Saint Nocturne glowed under the first quiet night it had earned in generations, full of messy people, unfinished repairs, dangerous memories, soft beginnings, bad jokes, better paperwork, and doors that would never again be trusted just because they were old. And beneath the closed chapel, the lantern heart burned steady. Not hungry. Watching. Witnessing. Waiting for them to keep choosing. Again. Again. Again.